Sure.
The word is out on the factory floor. Another election looms above the broken bones and bruises of South African business. It is likely to be the most crucial and highly contested election in a quarter of a century of democracy.
I think one hopes that President Ramaphosa, with his depth of understanding of business, would appreciate and act, not talk.
It is clear that whoever runs South Africa after the May polls is going to have a difficult job after years of decline.
I'm slightly worried in terms of where we're going to in terms of as a country.
The search for the growth that South Africa needs to support its expanding population is likely to prove complex and tough. CNBC Africa went out onto the factory floors to ask companies and entrepreneurs what they want from the politicians who want their vote. In an election year, this is entrepreneurs talking business and politics.
It's very tough because the opportunities are very small.
In the election battle, companies like this one are the trenches where the foot soldiers want to see change. This is one of many companies here in the industrial areas of Johannesburg that create jobs and churn out wealth. It's been struggling a bit over the last couple of years, but the people who run this place say they are hopeful, maybe, of change in this year's elections. This company, called Purple Infinity, makes uniforms for hotels and casinos across Africa. It's a competitive business that requires ever new creative ideas. The woman in charge of this here is designer Akona Madbuka.
My name is Akona. I come from a township called Kagiso. It started off as nothing but a dream. I decided to pursue my studies in the University of Johannesburg. I attended the Faculty of Art, Design and Architecture. I did my BTech in clothing management, and since then I've went out to seek internships, and one of the internships that I actually received was to work here. While I'm doing the dishes, I try to think, is this comfortable for me? Am I moving all right in this? What can I do to make sure that what I'm wearing best suits me and best suits my style? It's influences around the world even, you know, just trying to accommodate it to make it more African and suited for us and our figures. So it's just anything that would necessarily catch my eye and bring attention to how I can translate my culture in Africa and make a garment from it.
In 2016, I visited this company just before South Africa's municipal elections. Then it employed 40 people, turning out up to 5,000 uniforms a week from 10 kilometres of cloth. Now fewer people are using a lot less cloth to make fewer uniforms. It's been a tough 3 years, leaving a lot more empty workbenches in the factory floor. Isaac Makunyani is the CEO of the partner company here, Murento. He used to be in management at South African Airways and feels strongly that the politicians need to shape up.
Government should stop promising us now, should start supporting us.
Yeah.
That's what we need. Government should put more resources in financing small businesses. We need to start thinking like the Chinese. The Chinese, their strategy is to help every individual Chinese to start doing something. In South Africa, we've got a lot of people idling. If we can have a policy where every small South African with a business get assisted, even if you don't want to do business in South Africa, you go to Mozambique for instance, government should be able to assist you. As long as you buy product from South Africa, it's still growing our South African economy.
What do you think about this idea or this image that the government's putting out of clamping down on corruption, especially in business? Is it working for companies like you?
It's really working, because if you have noticed this year, from last year since the new government take over, we haven't had any tenders that are out there that are visible. You haven't seen one, because they're busy cleaning up the system from local municipalities to provincial government. They're busy cleaning.
At the very least, this company has put its empty benches back to work, training young would-be entrepreneurs in the art of making clothes and money.
I want to build my own company to uplift the spirit of the black woman.
Because that's the only thing the country needs right now, because the rate of unemployment is very high.
I'm trying to start my own business, so I'm still looking for funds.
In return for this skills transfer, the company earns empowerment credits. This lack of skills is merely one problem among mountains that will face the new government as it tries to revive growth in a stagnant economy. One of the big issues for business in this election is infrastructure. Now, 20 years ago, South Africa had infrastructure that was the envy of the continent. These days, to be kind, infrastructure is crumbling, to say the least. Whoever runs the country is going to have to face a big bill to build it up again.
Most of the time as an entrepreneur, you're driving to work, you are preoccupied by little issues like, have you paid your invoice? Are your staff happy? Are you reaching your target? Because everything revolves around these individuals.
Outside of Johannesburg, near Heidelberg, another entrepreneurial journey that tells the story of an economy with fear and hope in equal measure. I'm here in Heidelberg, about an hour's drive from Johannesburg and far from the chattering political classes. Now, you could drive through this town in about 5 minutes without even blinking, but here there are many companies churning out millions of rand in wealth every year, often under very difficult circumstances. This is Sami Mahole, an entrepreneur who hopes to become a soft drink billionaire. The 39-year-old called his company Skyrule because he wanted to rise and be the boss by cashing in on the drinks boom in South Africa. Yet he started out at the very bottom of business in his hometown of Tembisa, east of Johannesburg.
So I sold ice cream, and I would have my little cooler box fitted with a bell, as well as walking. And you will just walk around Tembisa, as well as where there's Ivory Park now, and you sort of get people's attention with your bell and sell this ice cream. When it gets finished, you literally have to go and stock some more. And I would do this from Friday, Saturday, as well as Sunday.
He is here in Heidelberg to see the canning of his drink. Every month he brings his drink concentrate here to be canned with carbon dioxide and water. It means about 500,000 cans a month for his business. This plant is owned by Brian Joffe's new Long for Life company. It was bought up by the former Bidvest millionaire's new venture, along with another canning plant in Cape Town. This one in Heidelberg turns out 21 million cans a month. For Mahole, this is the sweet sound of success, and he wants more. The supermarket drinks boom has been kind to his company and its dreams of ruling the sky. In its first year, 2013, the company was turning over 1.1 million rand. This year, because of the signing of new supply contracts, it's expected to hit 10 million rand. In 2020, the company projects turnover will be 30 million rand. The company wants to buy its own canning plant over the next 2 years. That could cost up to 70 million rand. If successful, this could be a game changer. Turnover projections for 2021 are as high as 200 million rand. It's not easy in an economy that has faltered over the last decade. What do entrepreneurs want the politicians to deliver after the May elections?
I think access to funding is still one of the issues that's facing most of the entrepreneurs, including myself. Access to market is one of those. Being a young beverage that is trying to fend for itself, it's a challenge for itself because these big boys, they bully us out of the shelf.
And what do you think the government could be doing better in terms of encouraging young entrepreneurs like yourself?
I think firstly they got to be in touch with entrepreneurs. They have to understand the real issues that affects us. It's not just about money, you know, but it's about the logistics, how you get to money. How do you support an entrepreneur? And it got to go beyond mentorship. How do you support a business like ours to make sure that it thrives? You know, it's a profitable business that can sustain itself. You'll find that in the history of since 1994, the government has funded a lot of business, but 70% of those businesses have gone under because it has always been focused on the funding model, but is not looking after the actual business going forward. There's got to be a model that's going to incubate beyond the funding. Once you have funded this individual.
In elections coming this year, what do you want to see from the government?
I want change.
You want change? Okay. How do you want change for business?
I want change for business. I want the structures of, you know, the DTI, the business buildings, to start to listen to entrepreneurs. And when we're saying listening to entrepreneurs, we're not talking about the talk shop where you gather all entrepreneurs, where you talk about these issues, then you don't apply. You literally walk away. We've done our exercise. The time that is wasted a lot on this application, because you have a business that has potential. You come in and you ask for funding, but therefore the person who's driving your application, they don't have the same passion, they don't have the same fight, they don't understand that there's a window that you're running against. All that they want to tick all that they want to do is want to tick their boxes.
In the next 2 years, Mahole hopes to gather enough investment to do what his number plate promises. It's going to be a tough job, convincing investors to put up their money in a flat South African economy. All he's asking the politicians to do is to make positive changes to the economy to give him a better chance of reaching for the sky.
South Africa cannot have a cabinet that's got 74 ministers and deputy ministers. Remember, Switzerland's got only 7.
In the second half of Election Notebook, we speak to one of South Africa's leading economists about what life and the economy holds after the May election. Iraj Abedian has been studying the South African economy for more than 30 years. The Economist warns the post-election years are likely to be tough.
I think my understanding is that the ANC is going to have a comfortable majority, somewhere between 58 and 60%. That's the expectations.
But the point is, whoever ends up controlling this economy is going to inherit a pretty much broken and struggling economy. How do you think that the ANC might deal with it with the new mandate?
I think one hopes that President Ramaphosa, with his depth of understanding of business, would appreciate and act, not talk, about reviving the foundations of the South African economy. Some of the foundational components of this economy have been literally destroyed. The president has done a lot of time, a lot of talk and a lot of rebuilding of the brand, but other than that, very little has changed. Very little has changed with respect to, as we even speak now, with respect to attracting more tourists in the country. A visa, which requires just a ministerial change, hasn't happened over a year. That pace of change is totally inappropriate, and we need the opposite.
What do you think is holding him back?
I don't know. I don't think he knows himself, because it's just totally inexplicable that a very simple administrative matter would be taking months and months and just well over a year. So I think in the mining sector a lot has been resolved, but not completely. And it's just one of those issues that a car has got 4 wheels, and if one car wants to move, all 4 wheels have to be functioning, not 3 of them. So it's no good to say that I've got 75% right. Still the car can't move. And our economy is pretty much stuck in that all the politicians and ministers and regulators talk about having done 75%.
What do economists think should be done to right the South African economy?
I think what we need to do, we need to move very quickly the obstacles that are on the way of growth. The most important one is energy. There's so much focus on Eskom and so little focus on energy. And the two are not the same thing. We need to define for the investors who exist and investors who want to attract, what is our energy policy for the next 30, 40 years? And if we can't answer that, and if we say, look, for the next 3 months we want to keep Eskom alive, or for the next 2 years we want to give it so much, it's not about Eskom, it's about the energy. That's the first thing that we have to do. Likewise, we have to answer the question of what is our medium to long-term water policy. Remember, whatever sector you want to invest in, there are basic things that have to be in place. Energy, water, urban management, education, health. Now, all of these sectors are actually left in the limbo. There's a lot of talk and promise and very little change on the ground.
What kind of changes do you think the government should be looking at, or the new government in its first 100 days?
I think the first 100 days, if I was going to suggest something, there should be some credible measures to turn the public sector into a public sector. No matter who is the president, no matter who is taking charge of which ministry, the machinery of the state is not an infrastructure that is geared and set for delivery of public services. The culture has been corrupted beyond recognition, and I can say it from my personal experience, and many others who the first decade of democracy as opposed to the second decade of democracy, you walk to the ministries, you walk to every department, you walk to every organ of public sector, the culture has been corrupted. So that is something that is in the direct influence of the new cabinet, and the president, armed with the new mandate, electoral mandate, has to put that as top of the range.
Because that's been one of the things that's plagued this current government, this corruption thing. And from a business point of view, it can spell the death knell for many, many businesses in this country.
Absolutely. I mean, if that sector, which is now grown to as much as over 50% of the GDP, once upon a time it was 30 plus, it has grown well over 50% of GDP. You cannot grow an economy if 50% of it is squandering resources. Even if it's not corrupt, it's not getting value for money. Starting from the top, South Africa cannot have a cabinet that's got 74 ministers and deputy ministers. Remember, Switzerland's got only 7. And just compare, and that makes the point. You need to trim the cabinet, you need to trim the ministerial handbook dramatically. We are talking about billions and billions of totally squandering of public resources. That's the money that should go to the delivery of public services. But that's also the tax money that should be very seriously spent, because businesses are struggling to generate it. When they don't, they start bumping up everything, not just electricity and not just water and not just this tax and that tax and other. Businesses cave in, especially and very especially medium to small businesses. SMMEs more particularly are hurt by this type of squandering of public resources.
So that's another point. I mean, the politicians always tell us that small businesses, entrepreneurs are the future of the economy, the way to growth. What's the reality?
The reality is just the opposite. The reality is that from Johannesburg to all the small dorpies in the country, because the cities are badly managed, starting from Johannesburg, you see how much the rates and taxes have gone up over the past 3 years, up to 40%. SMMEs cannot afford the rental when the rates and taxes go up by 40%, and alongside that, electricity prices go up every year double digit. 3 years later, the compound effect of rates, taxes, and electricity and everything else going up at the same rate is SMEs go under.
So what about this elusive growth? How could South Africa possibly bring it about after the elections?
I think growth can never happen unless and until investment takes place. Remember that the relationship is not just as strong as one-to-one. So the question has to be, how do we get investment going? And if you want to talk about investment, then we have to go sector by sector. Mining, agriculture, energy, water, etc., etc. And ask ourselves, what's holding back investment? Remember, the investor wakes up every morning to say, how can I invest? So you don't have to worry about him or her. You've got to worry about what's in his or her way. And that's where the role of the government is. So instead of keep talking about growth, government has got a very simple job. 2 days. The cabinet sits with the right people. They should identify in each sector what are the obstacles, come out with a business-related, very commercially viable solution that is credible, not promise, then investment will flow, and within 6 months, growth will register.
But in the last year, since Ramaphosa took over, there have been investment conferences. He's been to Davos, he's been around the world, selling this country. I mean, what about that?
I think all of them are, in the language of business, is public relations endeavors. Important, necessary, because remember, we come from 8-9 years of the cabinet led by the president demonizing business, demonizing the investment sector, demonizing corporate CEOs and business personalities. What the president has done, President Ramaphosa, is to reverse that process, to say no, entrepreneurs are as much of a hero as others, and therefore we need to bring the nation together if we want to grow. So investment conferences are important platforms to not demonize but glorify the role of business. Has he succeeded? Yes, he has consistently mentioned the need for respecting the business sector, but consistently from Davos to Johannesburg saying, unless we get the business sector on our side and unless they are convinced enough, encouraged enough, rejuvenated enough to invest, there is no hope of growth.
It's strange, though, that you do think that one of the big issues in this election, the appropriation of land without compensation, you as an economist don't think it's that much of a problem?
No, I don't think it's that much of a problem, because remember, Chris, the whole land issue, given its colonial history, not just in South Africa but elsewhere, but remaining with South Africa, is one of the biggest risks that we have to deal with. So I'm very excited that for the first time in 25 years, the issue has been brought to the center of debate. We have found a constitutional approach to dealing with the issues. And given all that we've heard from the legislature and from the president in terms of conditions under which land will be expropriated without compensation, I do not see any risk to the productive capacity of the economy. Will the mining, operational mines will be threatened? No. Will the operational farms will be threatened? No. Factories? No. Residential areas? No. So what will be? Well, there are land that are not used and they're ownerless, and or there is no plan for them, and or existing owners do not have any productive use for it. Expropriating that, will that affect the production base of the economy? My answer is no. Will it pose a threat to the GDP and to investment? The answer is no, particularly that it happens within the legislated framework of our constitution.
So you think many people saw the ANC taking on this idea of land without expropriation, without compensation, as caving in to some of the opposition, but you actually think it's a good thing that it's been brought into the public parliamentary domain? Absolutely.
I think it would have been wrecking the economy if this was left loose as an electioneering item, and the like of EFF and others would be running around the country now talking about a particular version or variation of expropriation without compensation, a la what the veterans did in Zimbabwe.
What is the feeling amongst foreign investors, bearing all in mind that we've talked about in this interview? What's the feeling you're getting from people overseas about investing here?
I think all our clients, and it's a fairly wide network across the globe, there is a sense of optimism, cautious optimism. They all want to see the president doing what he says, And if there is any doubt, it's really with respect to that particular element. Will he act fast enough, deep enough, and credible enough?
From the polished desks of economists in Rivonia to the factory floors of downtown Johannesburg and Heidelberg, most agree whichever party runs the country after the elections in May has a heck of a job on their hands to revive the once mighty South African economy.